Merci beaucoup, professeur Kotla. Je dois vous dire que pendant que M. Hamid parlait, j'ai été très mal à l'aise parce qu'on a des jours never again, plus jamais ça. Et puis juste maintenant, 15 ans après le génocide des Tutsis au Rwanda.
Sayings like never again and this should never happen again, and about 15 years now after the Rwandan genocide, I've heard from him, Mr. Hamid, that is exactly the same things are happening again. Of course, I'm an optimist and I fight for this never to happen again, but I do feel despair when I hear exactly the same things that are happening again. And he said at the beginning, at the end, we are human beings, we are human beings, and we are talking about the declaration of the rights of the person, but is a person from Darfur really a full human being? Does he have the right to be defended, to be represented, just like a Swiss person, an American, or anyone else? It was just the same as in 1994, Tutsis were killed. It's exactly 15 years now. The only mistake, the only sin that we had committed is to be a Tutsi. It's because we were born Tutsis, that's why we had to die. It was not that there were no treaties or no laws or conventions. They were there were conventions, there were treaties, but they were simply not enforced. And what does one have to do to enforce this? Why? One has to enforce them so that the family of Hamid does not have to be killed. They are simply human in Darfur, and their conventions have to be respected. Yes, people said, I have to kill you because you are Tutsi. There are many cynical anecdotes from that time. There were children at the time of the genocide who did not know that they were Tutsi. You can't see it when you look at people that they are Tutsi. We went to the same schools, we spoke the same languages, even the so-called typical physical details were not clear. And people asked the killers not to do what they came to do. But you cannot get rid of what you are. I liked very much what Barack Obama said when he spoke to Rwanda, to the Rwandese in April this year. You can say 1 million Tutsis, one can say 100,000, whatever. But behind the statistics, you have people, you have fathers, you have mothers, and I would ask you now to show the first picture on the screen to tell you what is a genocide. The photo that you can see here, I was very, very lucky to find this photo. Many in our country were not able to find photos again. This was my family in 1984. We just had our first baby. We were very happy, and we went to my husband's family to show the baby. If you start on the left, the first man on the left is my brother-in-law. He was the brother of my husband, and he was killed later on with his wife and his 2 children. Then there is my husband, who was killed in 94. Then there is my mother-in-law, Sisali. She was killed in 94. The little boy who's crouching at the feet of his mother, that was my little brother-in-law, who was also killed in 94. Then the tall girl next to my mother-in-law, that's myself, and my mother-in-law is holding our daughter, who miraculously survived. The man next to me was also killed. The next one was also killed with all his brothers and sisters. Then Mutesi is one of the sisters of my husband. She was also killed in 94. The next one is Mugalagu. He was another cousin who was also killed in 94. Out of all the people on the photo, there is just myself and my daughter who survived. This is a photo of my family, and this is another one. Now this is the last picture of the family. The last picture, that's my sister Stephanie, whom you saw earlier on. Here she was in her house with her 3 children. The baby she had in her arms was only 1 year old. The one who's holding a piece of bread was 5 years old, and Kinine, who has the orange Fanta bottle, was 3 years old, and all of them were killed, including the father, who's the one who took the picture. Thank you. I've showed you these pictures, and I can tell you I was lucky enough to get these photos, to find them. For those who survived after genocide, they were in such an emptiness, they had such an emotional emptiness. We had babies, we had husbands, we wanted to have a life like everyone else, and between April and July 1994, everything was just broken up. You survived maybe, but who were you? You are no longer the sister of someone, you're no longer someone's daughter, the cousin, or the wife of someone. You find yourself in a completely emotional hole, in a void, an emotional void. And it's not only this total emotional emptiness, but you also live with this idea, even a kind of guiltiness, because you were the one who survived. You have this guilt with you. Of course, you know that you couldn't do anything to save them, but you also have a lot of anger, and I felt this anger come up inside myself, because there are so many lives that were simply wasted for nothing. Was it possible for this to happen? It could have been different. It could have been for this family to still be here if there had been a will for this to happen. They knew that we were in danger of being exterminated. The world knew it, and they did nothing, just like Mr. Hamid. And why did this happen? Because we're not worth much. We were not worth much. I'm quite cynical, and I do not really believe in all these beautiful words and conventions and so on. Are we really human if one's own state is trying to kill you? Are the other countries or the other states, the other peoples going to try and mobilize to do something about it? We were also not only in an emotional, terrible situation, but we were also in an economic disaster. Everything had been taken from the houses. We had nothing left, but it was even more symbolic. Even the roads were destroyed, the roads and the paths leading to the houses, all of these were destroyed. This annihilation was almost saying to us, you never were there. You are nothing. Of course, the people who did these things were people we knew. They were our neighbors. There were people who we respected. There were teachers, there were doctors, there were adults whom we respected. And later, after it happened, we wondered, who can you still trust? And it's very difficult to live if you can't trust anyone. But even in Rwanda, even in the genocide of the Tutsis, there were some humans. They were rare, but they did exist. There were people who were killed because they wanted to protect Tutsis. And this does give you some courage, because you think if peace people have existed, they may still exist. They may exist amongst ourselves, and they may also exist in Darfur. These are the people we can count on. Now, let me get back to now, 15 years later. I wanted to apologize about talking for talking about my anger, but actually I don't want to apologize, because it's simply something you have. April 94, it was very difficult. There are many reasons that people can give for not having done anything. But 15 years later, what is being done? What does the international community do to help those people who have managed miraculously to escape? We've found ourselves refugees without anybody, without our family. Most of the time we were affected physically and emotionally. There are so many people who escaped who were completely handicapped physically and emotionally. I want to speak of some very specific cases. There was a young girl who was thrown into different holes, and she is now in a wheelchair. We are trying to get her to have an operation, and this operation can be done in Switzerland and in Belgium. It would cost 80,000 euros, but we can't get this money. At the time when Solange was being beaten and her bones broken, nobody was there. But now, where is the international community? Why are they not helping Solange? I don't want to say, let's just have a conference and then there's nothing that's going to happen afterwards. But if I can't get something out of this conference for people like Solange, for Marie-Claire and for others, this isn't worth having. So we met amongst survivors and we discovered a terrible reality. We found that we women were constantly raped by all sorts of people. Most of the survivors, that especially the women, got HIV/AIDS, and we fought for years for these sexual violences to be recognized in international tribunals, even in Rwanda. We were lucky there because these things were taken into account. Sexual violence to women was recognized as being a legitimate complaint, but the men who were there, the men who gave these women AIDS through rape, they got the retroviral drugs and they survived. And the women who had to be witnesses, who were not given the drugs, who were not protected by the UN, they died because they were not given the retroviral drugs. Nowadays we do have the medicines and we get them at a relatively low price, but women have still got to fight to survive. What can we do for women not to worry all the time, not to stay awake at night and think, how are we going to feed our children? What is going to happen? But the most difficult situation is for children who remained orphans. Some had to become heads of families at 12 or 15 years of age. How can they find some semblance of a normal life? I want to challenge you today. We have to get out of here with some very specific and concrete proposals and not just declarations, because declarations aren't going to make a big and essential difference to those survivors. There's a major chapter that I have difficulty talking about. Justice for survivors. What justice is there for survivors? Of course, we hear people say, yes, of course, the situation is difficult, and we understand that there have to be symbolic judgments because there are too many people that have to be sentenced, and there are some symbolic sentences because they have killed Tutsis. And here we have to congratulate countries. In Holland, for example, this has happened. In Belgium it has happened, and in Switzerland it should happen as well. The people who committed genocide, these were people who, just like you and me, people who studied in various countries, Switzerland, Belgium and so on, they have connections here. And for years in Rwanda there was a discriminatory situation, but it was the government that organized this discrimination. And the embassies that were here, all the organizations, the missions, they contributed and nobody reacted. And today it is simply going on as before. Today in Switzerland, who is being given asylum and who is not being given asylum? It's a very frightening situation. There's a young boy, I'm speaking about him because it's a very specific example here in Switzerland. There's a boy from Rwanda who wrote a book about the genocide. His whole family was killed, but he was the only one left for dead, but he was not dead. And the Red Cross found him under the bodies. He is completely handicapped. His whole face is completely distorted because he's been cut. His left eye was gouged out. His left arm was cut off. And he is in a terrible situation. But Switzerland does not want to give him asylum. The Swiss authorities do not want to grant him asylum. Why does this boy not have the right to say, I want to be safe from my killers? He went back to Rwanda and people attempted to kill him again. That man who tried to kill him is old and he is free. But the boy who suffered all these terrible injuries will never be free from these awful ideas, from these awful images. And if he could be here in Switzerland, he could have psychotherapy, he could have a certain stability, he could start a new life. If he was granted asylum in Switzerland, I just wanted to give you an example. He's not the only one, there are many others. I think my time has probably run out now. I just wanted to ask you one thing. 15 years later, people will not come back if they have been killed. All I'm asking is my neighbours in Rwanda to tell me where my family was buried so that I can give them a proper burial, so that I can have a certain psychological stability and go forward in my life. Now I'm asking you to fight, to join our struggle. I don't want to be coming to you with cap in hand. I don't want to ask and beg you for asylum for Riverien, for this boy who is handicapped. There should be a right to compensation, very specific compensation. And we should get this compensation now, not in 15 or 20 years. These terrible injuries cannot be healed. Some of the things need to be done now because in 20 years' time, nothing can be done. For example, we need surgery, we need plastic surgery so that our faces can be restored to something normal. People need to be offered this kind of help, not as charity, but they should be given it by right. Our neighbours who've taken a machete and who have injured people such as Riverain, we should get compensation not only from our government but also from your government. I keep thinking of France. I don't want to start discussing France and all the responsibilities that France had, but I would like to mention something which is not being mentioned. Switzerland, Germany, England, the United States, they said, well, this is not a genocide, and that was used as an excuse for not intervening. So I can say, well, yes, of course, I will give you my pardon, but only on condition, namely that you help those that have survived. They live in a very difficult situation. You must help them not survive, but help them to live a proper life. And there need to be some very concrete, very specific activities and actions at the high level. We have been able to reach governments, reach people who are important. Now, if we just want to organize a conference to be a talking shop, then I'm not interested. However, if it leads to practical steps, that would be the great thing. Thank you.